The road to independence. By the early 18th century, the English colonies in North America had grown in size, population, and complexity. From Massachusetts in the north to Georgia in the south, these settlements were home to people from a variety of European backgrounds as well as enslaved Africans and Native Americans. Life in the colonies was shaped by hard work, survival, and community, but also by growing tensions with the British Crown. These tensions would eventually ignite one of the most dramatic revolutions in history, the fight for American independence. At first, the colonies were loyal to Britain. They shared its language, legal system, and culture, and many colonists still considered themselves British subjects. However, as the colonies prospered and expanded, they developed a sense of autonomy and identity. Local governments, town meetings, and colonial assemblies gave colonists experience in self-rule. They managed taxes, local laws, and defenses, learning that they could govern themselves effectively. Despite this growing independence, the British Crown maintained ultimate authority. The king and parliament claimed the right to tax and control the colonies, often without consulting the people who lived there. Tensions rose as new laws and taxes were imposed to pay for Britain's debts, especially those accumulated during the French and Indian War, which had pitted the British and their colonial allies against the French and their Native American allies. The war had been costly, and Britain looked to the colonies to help repay it. The first major flashpoint came with the Sugar Act of 1764, a tax on molasses imported into the colonies. While the tax itself was small, it was the principle that angered colonists. They had no representation in parliament and therefore no say in the laws that affected them. This idea became central to the revolutionary movement, famously summarized in the slogan, "No taxation without representation." Tensions escalated with the Stamp Act of 1765, which required colonists to buy special stamp paper for legal documents, newspapers, and even playing cards. Protests erupted, and colonists formed groups like the Sons of Liberty to resist the law. Public demonstrations, petitions, and sometimes violent actions demonstrated that the colonies would not easily accept direct interference from Britain. The Stamp Act was eventually repealed, but the conflict between colonial autonomy and imperial control had been firmly established. Over the next decade, Britain continued to impose new laws, including the Townshend Acts, which taxed imported goods such as glass, paper, and tea. Colonists responded with boycotts, refusing to purchase British goods. Women played a critical role in these boycotts, producing homemade textiles and substitutes for imported products, showing that the resistance extended beyond public protests into everyday life. The situation reached a boiling point in 1770 with the Boston Massacre. British soldiers fired into a crowd of colonists protesting outside the customs house, killing 5 people. The event was widely publicized, fueling anger and resentment toward British rule. It became a symbol of the oppressive nature of the crown and a rallying point for colonial resistance. In 1773, the conflict over taxes culminated in the Boston Tea Party. Frustrated by the Tea Act, which gave the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales, American colonists disguised themselves as Native Americans and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. This bold act of defiance enraged the British government and led to the Intolerable Acts, a series of punitive measures designed to punish Massachusetts and assert control over the colonies. Instead of intimidating the colonists, these measures united them. Representatives from 12 colonies gathered in 1774 for the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They petitioned the king, organized boycotts, and began preparing for the possibility of armed conflict. The idea that the colonies could act together as a united front was a major step toward independence. The first shots of the American Revolution were fired in 1775 at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. British troops sent to seize colonial weapons encountered local militias. The shot heard round the world marked the beginning of open warfare between Britain and its colonies. The conflict quickly spread, with militias and volunteer armies forming across the 13 colonies. Leadership during this period was crucial. Figures like George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin emerged as key voices in the struggle. Washington, appointed commander of the Continental Army, faced the daunting task of leading a largely inexperienced force against one of the world's most powerful militaries. Despite challenges, he inspired his troops with determination, courage, and the vision of a free nation. The revolutionary ideas fueling the fight were rooted in Enlightenment thinking. Colonists emphasized natural rights, liberty, and the belief that government should serve the people, not control them. Pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense argued passionately for independence, persuading many who were previously undecided. Ideas about equality, justice, and self-governance spread rapidly, helping to unify the colonies around the cause of freedom. By 1776, the push for independence became inevitable. On July 4, the Declaration of Independence was adopted, drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson. It boldly stated that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The colonies were no longer seeking reform within the British system, they were declaring themselves free and independent states. The war that followed was long, difficult, and filled with hardships. American forces faced shortages of food, clothing, and weapons, and many battles ended in defeat. However, the colonies received critical support from France, Spain, and the Netherlands, whose military aid and resources helped turn the tide against Britain. Battles like Saratoga and the harsh winter at Valley Forge became symbols of resilience, determination, and unity. Native Americans and enslaved Africans also played complex roles during the Revolution. Some native tribes allied with the British, hoping to protect their lands, while others supported the Americans in exchange for promises of autonomy. Enslaved Africans were promised freedom in exchange for military service, highlighting the complicated and often contradictory ideals of liberty and equality during the war. By 1781, with the decisive victory at Yorktown, British forces surrendered to Washington and his allies. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, formally recognized the independence of the United States, marking the successful conclusion of the revolutionary struggle. The new nation faced enormous challenges, including building a stable government, creating laws, and uniting a diverse population under one political system. The road to independence was more than a series of battles and political acts. It was a profound transformation of society. Ordinary colonists became patriots, thinkers debated the meaning of freedom, and communities learned the importance of self-governance. The ideals born during this period would influence not only the future of the United States but also inspire revolutions around the world. In retrospect, the American Revolution was a story of courage, vision, and persistence. It was a time when a group of colonies, once loyal subjects, chose to define their destiny, creating a nation founded on principles of liberty, equality, and self-determination. The journey from discontent under British rule to the Declaration of Independence demonstrates how ideas, leadership, and collective action can reshape history. The road to independence reminds us that freedom is not easily achieved. It requires sacrifice, cooperation, and unwavering belief in a shared vision. From the town meetings in New England to the battlefields of the South, the fight for independence shaped the character of a nation, laying the foundation for the democratic principles and civic values that continue to guide the United States today.